And I'm pleased to share with you a lovely, lovely message I received from a young woman in Nantes, France, who tells me that she's not connected to any Jewish community where she is right now. And she's learning Tanya. She's learning Tanya with us right here, around this table. Can you imagine some remote place in France that doesn't have a Chabad, doesn't have a shul? And she's learning Tanya. She says it's her favorite Torah study, and she's becoming more and more observant. It's really beautiful to see that. Okay, so to you from France, we say thank you, and it's a pleasure to study with you. Okay, so we're up to we're in the Practical Tanya. If you don't have it, I encourage you to buy this book, Practical Tanya, by the Gutnick Library, of Jewish Classics by Chaim Miller. Yeah. Okay. Here we are. We're on page 39. We're on page 39. We're exploring the animal soul, the natural soul. Now, it's very important. You got to get to know your natural soul, because this is your default setting. If you don't know who you are, you're going to have a real hard time defining happiness. Right? If you don't know who you are, you're going to struggle. I sat with a woman this week explaining to her, Tanya, we were talking about how you have to love your fellow like yourself. And she said to me, Rabbi, can't. I can love them more than myself. But I don't like myself. I don't love myself. And I thanked her for her brutal honesty, but we really dived deep into who she really is. You know, when you realize that there's different levels and layers of your own self and your own consciousness, I said, okay, which part of you don't you like? Let me take you deeper. I said, put on your scuba gear, drop the snorkel, let's go scuba, and let's really dive deep into your consciousness. Because right here we're going snorkel. Snorkel is the outer layer of who you are. This is where we're holding right now in Tanya. We're not yet at chapter 2, which is the core of our existence. We're now in chapter 1 still, which is the superficial yet outer expression of who we are. This is our
she doesn't like is not herself.
Right, the animal soul. The self that she doesn't like. The self that she doesn't like is not her true self. Right, exactly. Let's try to figure this out. So we're in page 39, middle of page 39. So from this animal soul, I'm going to read today. We're going to read inside, and we're going to try to cover ground. We're going to finish chapter 1 today, right? Hopefully, well, maybe not, because it's going to get controversial. So I'm not optimistic we're going to finish chapter 1 today. There's a little monkey wrench at the end of chapter 1. So I think that's going to throw us on a tangent. Okay. So middle page 39. From the animal soul, which is invested directly into the body, all the bodily temperaments arise. This is the personality that you're most familiar with. It comes from your animal soul. This is a reference to the classical model of 4 temperaments. In this system, various natural temperaments or humors of the personality are understood to arise from the body itself rather than from the mind. The 4 temperaments are choleric, phlegmatic, sanguine, and melancholic. Sanguine and melancholic. I'm not sure what that translates as. Is that English? I know melancholic means sad. Sanguine is blood. It's calm. Okay, good. And choleric, is that an illness? I think what it means is, well, let me tell you the Hebrew. This is part of this is the part of translation of Torah that I don't understand. You meet a Jew. A Chabadnik meets a Jew on the street corner of Manhattan, and he says to him, "Excuse me, sir, are you Jewish?" So he says, "Yes." "Would you like to eat tefillin?" He says, "What's that?" Tefillin, it's phylacteries.
Oh, of course, phylacteries.
I mean, if you don't understand the Hebrew, then why do you think the guy's going to understand ancient Greek? Like, what? How are you translating Hebrew into Greek in order to explain it? What are you expecting the guy to say? "Oh, phylacteries, of course I'd like to lay phylacteries." Choleric is bad-tempered or irritable. Thank you. Good. So I would hope that the translation should be into a language that we actually do understand as opposed to one that we don't. So the 4 temperaments seem to be bad-tempered, Phlegmatic, which I'll do the Hebrew. Let me just do the Hebrew because it's a little more complicated. So one is like anger, the other one is pleasure, the third one is just airy, just frivolous, and the fourth one is lazy, melancholy, right? Yeah, it's all the same. You'll see in a moment. You'll see melancholy and lazy. They all come because remember, there's four. We're going to talk about four roots. There's fire, air, earth, and water. Right. Fire, air, earth, and water. So that which is so that which is very emotional, like anger and pride and ego, that comes from fire. It's like fire which is jumping up. It's all over the place. Phlegmatic, which is unemotional, stoic, calm. No. Humor, as in.
I got it.
Yeah, calm. So basically, with that, I'm not getting into these words, but the second one, so fire. Then there's air. Air is representing the frivolous stuff. That's the just sort of soap opera. That's making fun. That's jest. That's no, calm is going to be different. Stoic and calm. Well, water is the source of pleasure and desires. And finally, earth is the source of melancholy, lazy, sadness, depression, all that stuff. Let's see. So these four temperaments closely parallel the classic subdivision of matter into four elemental forms: fire, air, earth, and water. In the Kabbalah, this idea is developed further, and the four elements are depicted not only in physical but also in spiritual phenomena. Just as the body is composed of four physical elements, the soul is understood to be composed also of four spiritual elements: fire, air, earth, and water. Following these classical models, the Tanya will now explain that the four temperaments of the body actually flow from four spiritual elements present in the animal soul. The negative temperaments stem from the negative side of the animal soul's four spiritual elements. So all your bad characteristics come from your animal soul. We're going to say soon that your good characteristics also come from your animal soul. We're going to explain that at the very end of the chapter. But for right now, all of your bad tendencies come from your animal soul. Let's see. According to the Kabbalah, page 40, each of the four elements, both in the physical and spiritual forms, has a good side and an evil side. As Rabbi Chaim Vital explains, this is the primary student of the Arizal. You should know that Adam's sin, eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, resulted in both his soul and body, likewise, becoming a mixture of good and evil. And this caused such a mixing to occur in all the physical and spiritual worlds. Now there is nothing which does not contain both good and evil. Until the sin of the tree of knowledge, good and evil were distinct. The identification of evil was manifest through the snake. Good was manifest outside of the snake, everything else other than the snake, which is why Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden were able to have marital relations in public without shame, because it was holy. There wasn't any negativity. There wasn't any evil side to it. There wasn't any negative side to it. It was just holy. So Adam and Eve, they didn't need to cover up their own nakedness because they walked around naked, because they were just manifestations of holiness. The tree of knowledge of good and evil was a tree of commingling. That's where good and evil mixed. And that's what God wanted them to avoid. He said, don't go there, because if you go there, then you're going to have to become wise to adjudicate between good and evil. Once you eat from that tree of good and evil, then good and evil will be incorporated within you. The entire world, through that microcosm of yourself, will be incorporated with good and evil. And from this point on, you will always have to vacillate between good and evil. They will be commingled. And that's when life really became interesting. Once Adam and Eve ate from the tree of good and evil, evil got mixed into them. And that's why, what was the punishment of the tree of good and evil? Think about it. Mortality. Because you now have evil within you. If you're going to live forever, then evil will live forever. Pain would be the manifestation of the presence of evil, right? So that's what happens here. And as a result of that, the Tanya now plays along with that theme to say that because of that, our animal soul too is also comprised of good and evil. So it's got negative traits, but it's also got good traits. Echoing Rabbi Chaim Vital's discussion, the Tanya now details the four elements of the animal soul alongside the bodily temperaments they give rise to. We will begin with the negative side of the elements, which is the strongest energy in the animal soul. And then we're going to talk about the positive side of the animal soul's attributes. Let's go through this relatively quickly. Now, the four elements are fire, air, earth, and water, right? So, namely, the choleric temperament of anger and arrogance from the negative side of the element of fire in the animal soul. The overstated self-image of arrogance reflecting fire's physical tendency to rise upwards. Reb Chaim Vital explains that it is the result of a person's arrogance that he becomes angry, seeing that people do not comply with his will. If he were humble, which is the opposite of fire, humble, recognizing his shortcomings, humble was more like earth, by the way, he would not become angry at all. So arrogance and anger are in fact the same temperament. This negative temperament has three derivatives. Number one, resentment in the heart, for without arrogance, there would be no resentment in the heart. Two, seeking power and honor to show off to others. And three, hatred for somebody because he's greater than you. So when you realize that the element of fire within you is what's causing arrogance, the resentment, the hatred, the pursuit of arrogance, the pursuit of honor, what's going to happen? This is an emerging study in modern day psychology, what I'm about to tell you right now. An emerging study in modern day psychology. It's called IFS, Internal Family Systems, also known as parts work. Parts work. Anybody heard of parts work? You've heard of it? It's quite an interesting. It's quite an interesting study, and what it does is that it says like this. We tend to identify with our feelings. If you're jealous, you become fully consumed with jealousy. If you're feeling like somebody's annoying you, right, then you erupt in this road rage, or you say things that you don't really mean because you allow it to consume you. If somebody insults you or ignores you and they trigger some latent childhood trauma of rejection or abandonment, if your wife gives you anything less than a full-blown compliment, right? And the husband just erupts in this rage for irrational rage, because really what he's doing is that he's reverting back to the abused 8-year-old that was ignored by his emotionally abusive or emotionally absent parent. Then what's happening is that he can't control himself. He's like a hostage. But parts work and IFS tells us along the lines of what Tanya is saying right here, is that if you can just isolate it within you, say, that's just a part of me. It's just a part of me, and you observe this part of you. Eckhart Tolle also talks a lot about this. You can just observe. You say, okay, it's interesting. Jealousy has arrived. Hello, Mr. Jealousy. Welcome to my living room, they call it. It's nice to have you, but remember, you don't own this place. You can be a guest in my living room, but please don't destroy the furniture. Right? And if you can approach your anger, your jealousy, your rejection, your abandonment with this attitude of internal family systems or parts work, then you're able to stay in control, even when it seems like you've been hijacked.
Compartmentalizing.
It requires you to be self-aware. It requires you to be self-aware.
Self-aware. Now, it's very interesting you say that, Harvey, because if you're living life reactively, you cannot possibly be self-aware.
Absolutely.
Because jealousy happens to you. Resentment happens to you. But if you come in conscious, then you become ready for the day. If you're coming in proactive, you're ready to take on whatever emotions. And the only way that you can do that is through prior meditation, through morning davening. Now, morning davening is one way to do that, obviously. It's the only way. But when we daven, when we come to shul, we like tefillin in the morning. You start your day focusing inward. You're reflecting on my internal structure. You're reflecting on the fact that I have a head, I have a heart, I have a goal, I have where I'm coming from, I have where I'm going, I have my ambitions and desires. And, the guy next to me is being a nudnik. Okay. So that's all right. We can observe the nudnik and move on, right? Oh, you point in that direction. Okay.
I wasn't.
So, a good example of this is Haman. Good example is Haman. Haman, think about this guy. He had all the money in the world. Haman was willing to buy out the Jews for 10,000 talents of silver. That's like, it's the equivalent of like $600 or $60 billion in today's currency. It's some crazy amount. I went to the calculation. And Achashverosh is like, keep the change. But he's willing to destroy the Jews. Why? Why? Because one guy would have bowed down to him. I mean, Achashverosh gets appointed 3 days before Pesach. On the 13th day of Nisan is when he rises to power. That same day, Mordechai doesn't bow down to him. That same day, he makes the decree. That same day, he makes the gallows so the next day he makes the gallows. That was the 15th. So 2 days later, he makes the gallows for Mordechai. And it's on the 16th of Nisan, 3 days later, that he's dead. Haman is the guy that had it all.
And nothing happened to Haman's wife. What happened to him?
Okay.
She's a real paskunya.
She lost everything.
No, she was actually a wise woman. She told him, listen, you're starting to fall to the Jews, you're never going to get back up again. But I just want to say, Haman had it all. He had it all. He had one blip on his radar that wasn't bowing down to him, but he couldn't stomach it because he was defined by his emotion. He sees like a bull. He sees red, and that's it. Nothing else exists. That guy is ruining my life. Hello, turn around. Everybody else is bowing down to you. No, the one broken tile is killing him. Yeah. Literally killed him. Right? So we have to be conscious of this. And when Alter Rebbe now breaks down our consciousness, he says all of your evil characteristics are really, they're just part of the four elements within you. There's fire, there's air, there's earth, and there's water. So if you're feeling jealous right now about somebody's car outside, right? Say, oh, today's a day of fire. Lovely. Nice to meet you. And if today you're feeling a little indulgent, right? You're unable to control your desires. You're like, oh, today's a water park day. So I see the water is flowing through me. I'm experiencing the indulgence of water. You can observe, be the observer, and thus reach a more elevated state of peace and tranquility within you. So let's keep on this analysis for a few more minutes. The second element, the phlegmatic temperament of seeking physical gratification and pleasures, which stems from the negative side of the element of water in the animal soul, reflecting the physical reality that all pleasures are ultimately cultivated from water. That's a Kabbalistic concept. That, where's all the pleasures? Whenever there's a pleasure, there's always some sort of a spa or some sort of a pool or an ocean associated. You don't really find pleasures in the desert. I don't think. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Whenever there's some sort of a pleasure going on, there's some sort of a water feature, a water fountain. There's a bar somewhere, right?
And the connection with Torah being water?
So Torah being water is actually, I don't know.
Something else.
Well, Tanya chapter 5 says that the thing with Torah and water is very interesting. That water, it flows from a very high place to a low place. Angel falls, right? It goes all the way down. It's the same water. So too, when Hashem gives us his Torah, which starts at the very, very heights of heaven. And even though it comes down to donkeys and cows and acquisitions and real estate and disputes between tenants and neighbors and employers, right? It's still the same exact kernel. That's the analogy to water. Daniel says, Eckhart Tolle, acknowledge and ignore, let be, don't give it attention, right? Because you observe it, right? Melissa, that's deep. That's deep. That pain is the manifestation of evil. And we live on, so evil lives on. Yes, that was about Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Good. Good morning to everybody else. Okay, good. So the derivatives of this temperament are two of the water temperament. Number one, coveting, desiring to steal your friend's money or his wife and everything that he has in order to indulge in them. Yeah, his wife. You don't know people that want that? Why is everybody pointing to him?
They want somebody else's right.
You never heard of such a thing? I must be speaking to a very elevated crowd of him. They can't even relate.
We can't relate to that.
2, jealousy, to be jealous of your wealthy friend. So this is about desire, envy, jealousy. All of that stems from the water within you. You say, oh, water. It's not me. I am not water. There's a temperament of water. It's like think about your house, right? You have a house. I have concrete. I have steel. I have roof tiles. I have electric wiring. Right, I have granite countertops, right? But that's not who I am. So if the granite is being more expressive today, or if the plumbing is being more expressive today, okay, we'll call plumber. But it doesn't mean that that's who I am. 3, the sanguine temperament arising from the negative side of the element of air in the animal soul. This is silliness, mockery, boasting of virtues that you don't have, another worthless discussion that benefits neither body nor soul. It's just useless conversation. Exactly. It's nourishkeit. It's just
Good.
nourishkeit. Every morning when I wake up early, I say the blessing of no Torah. This, we say a blessing. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. No Torah. We thank God for giving us the Torah, and I say, God, thank you so much for giving us this Torah, which, like water, down here is the same exact that you do above. Because imagine a life without Torah. You'd be running around just chasing a tail, just running after the rat race and the bills and the pleasures of this world. We would have we'd be stuck in this little cage of this world. But Torah gives us this rope to be able to connect to something so much higher. You'd be stuck with nourishkeit, which is nonsense all day long. And I challenge you, by the way, to think about, give yourself a percentage, a mark. How much of the past 90 minutes has been Baba Meises coming out of your mouth? Think about that.
There you go.
Now, hopefully it's been very, very little because you've been davening.
Part of the day.
That's the best part of the day. But let me ask you about the next 90 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. The next,
Type of thing.
how about the next 12 hours? Okay.
Oh.
Think about it.
Oh,
If you had to give yourself an average mark on how much Baba Meises come out of your mouth in a span of 16 hours waking hours of your day, just think about that.
Not so much Baba, just nourishment.
Yeah, think about it. Are you 40% Baba Meises? Are you like 99.6% Baba Meises? Or are you maybe like 4% Baba Meises? Yeah, it does. If you're, my father always says that the reason why Hashem made our fingertips round is they fit perfectly in the ear. By the way, the newest thing, I love this invention. This Bluetooth, what do they call them? Bluetooth, no.
Noise suppressant stuff.
For people that can't hear, what do they call them? People that can't hear.
Hearing aids.
Hearing aids.
Yeah.
The Bluetooth hearing aids.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
You could be talking to somebody, you don't like what he's saying, you just change channel. Just,
No.
you put on your cell phone and connect
Yeah,
to Spotify
exactly.
and whatever you want. You could just start listening to a podcast. You could be talking to someone.
Not only
I'm like straight into a podcast, just change the channel. The rabbi's sermon is boring, bam.
You know, the in thing now is people buy these fake earbuds that they put in their ears so that people tend not to talk to them. Because
Yeah.
they see that. And so yeah.
Right.
Or they
that's-
can
that's-
talk to themselves and people think.
Yeah,
Right.
I think you're
So
on
if you think
right?
about that, how much
My
air?
wife always says I talk to myself, and I say when I want to have an intelligent conversation, I talk to myself.
So the
How's that
the manifestation of this is how much hot air?
He's enjoying it.
How much hot air are you made up of?
Oh, my goodness.
Think about that, because air.
He had so much hot air, the balloon floated.
Think about that. But how much hot air is in your daily experience? I remember being in yeshiva with Zalman Gopin. Zalman Gopin is one of the greatest thinkers of Hasidus in the world today. He lives in Kfar Chabad. I actually stayed back an extra year because I wanted to just drink from his fountains. He was just incredible. He taught Hasidus to us, and I must be 19 and 20 years old. So Zalman Gopin taught us that, in the Torah you have different sized letters. There's like regular sized letters, large sized letters, and small sized letters. As I'm writing my books, I just discovered that if you change in Google Docs, if you change the title, it becomes like the size of the font. It actually becomes like a chapter heading. So it's much easier to find where you are. It's amazing. I was like, wow, my daughter showed me there. It just changed my whole ability. So he was telling us that there's different sized letters in the Torah. You have regular size, you have the large letters and the mini letters, right? Because when you speak, there's something called Oisius Ravrevin and Oisius, what's opposite? Ravrevin means large letters and Oisius small.
Ketanot.
Zeirin, probably. Yeah, probably. Oisius Zeirin, small letters. Because the words that come out of your mouth, sometimes they just packed densely with content. They're big letters. And sometimes they're just microscopic letters that are coming out of your mouth because there's garnished dirt. There's nothing there. Some people, they come over to me and I'm like, I dread asking them, how are you? Because I know this is going to be a 20-minute nothing. It's going to be, but other people, you talk to them and you're talking to somebody wise and it's such a pleasure. You say, how are you? And it becomes just a pleasure of a conversation, right? So let's be mindful of the words that come out of our mouth, that we're not overly emphasizing the air. Air is important. Fire is important. Water is important. But if you're full of hot air, there's nothing there. There's garnished up. Let's do one more. These traits are insubstantial. like air, the attitude reflects airy lightness and a lack of responsibility. And finally, the melancholic temperament, page 41, of laziness and depression stemming from the negative side of the element of earth in the animal soul. It is important to recall that we're speaking here of inherent bodily temperament stemming from the animal soul, which is embodied in the blood. These are natural propensities with which you were born and to which you will automatically default in the absence of enlightenment and spiritual work. That's very important. Bear in mind, this is your default soul. If you have blood, your soul is in your blood. It says in the Torah, you cannot eat blood. It's treif, because blood has the soul in it. Your soul is in your blood. So your soul has 4 spiritual temperaments to it: fire, air, earth, and water. So by virtue of being alive, it means you're going to have to struggle with laziness, struggle with frivolity, narishkeit, struggle with hedonistic pleasures, and struggle with envy and desire and passion and ego. But if you can be conscious of the compartmentalization, as Andy said, of the soul within you, realize that this is just my structure, but it doesn't define me. It's my house. It's not who I am.
Is there any way to overcome those negative? I mean, I understand you're saying we have them. They shouldn't rule over us. We should understand what they are. But is there any way to not have them at all?
So I'll say it like this. Harvey says no, but I would say yes sometimes. I'll tell you why. We read by Joseph when he was in the pit being sold as a slave by his brothers in cold blood. It says, "V'aborek en b'mayim," and the pit was empty; it had no water. Now remember, everything in Torah comes from the written Torah. Everything in the oral Torah cites always back to the written Torah. If you can't cite it back to the written Torah,
Then
you're a faker. You're making it up. You're just making it up. And I challenge you to challenge your teachers. Somebody said to me, "Oh my God, I couldn't believe it." The other day, I was talking to someone with some interesting, existential question. And he told me that his rabbi gave a sermon about it. I said, okay. So what did he say? And he told me some Baba Maisa story about a Baba Maisa. About some story that he made up, and that was the answer. I'm like, that's the answer? How are you not embarrassed to accept that answer?
We all go to those shows.
I mean, what? The guy sucked it out of his thumb. He read it in Aesop's Fables or something, and now it became your worldview? Like, seriously? This is embarrassing. Citation. The role of a student is to make his teachers miserable. That's what I tell my kids. The role of a student is to make your teachers miserable. Challenge them.
Kids are making you miserable.
Yeah, I love it.
By challenging them.
By
not by
challenging
doing
Yeah,
bad
absolutely.
things. Don't do
Go back a
bad
second.
things.
So Jacob is in the-
Oh, so he's in the pit. So back to the pit. So what does it mean? What does it mean? This editorial inconsistency. It says the pit was empty. It had no water. Okay, we need to know this piece of information. Why do we need to know it had no water? Like it makes a difference to my life today that had no water. And if it did have water, would it make a difference to my life? The borek and b'mayim, it had no water. Shkoyach. Why don't you tell me that it didn't have? What else didn't it have in there? Right? The Gemara asks. V'china chashim. No, sorry. It says against the Gemara. It says mayim en boy. The Torah points out to us that it had no water, but guess what? Nechashim v'akravim yesh boy. But snakes and scorpions it did have. When the Torah tells us that it didn't have water, it's trying to tell us what?
So it wasn't empty.
It was empty of water,
Empty of water.
but it was filled with snakes and scorpions. Now, so what's the message here? If it's empty, then but it's full of snakes and scorpions. What the Torah is trying to teach us over here is that the pit was empty of content. When you're empty of light, of life-giving water, then you're filled with life-terminating entities, right? There is no such thing as a vacuum, is what the Torah is telling us. When you're void of water, you're not void. You're not a vacuum. You're filled with negativity, with toxins, with snakes and scorpions. So in other words, my answer to your question, and where I would respectfully disagree with Harvey, sometimes. This is Torah study. We fight it out. Well, let me finish. So when you are filling your mind with positive content, with water, the water will drown out the snakes for that period of time. But the minute that you choose to let go, to allow yourself to be void of content, automatically the default sets in, which is what Harvey was talking about. Then the default sets in, and you now will be overcome with your snakes and scorpions, with your fire, air, earth, and water, the negative attributes, because that's the nature of your animal soul, of your natural soul. That's the challenge of being human.
This is such an important concept because if we think in terms of thought, speech, and action, it's so difficult to always control your thoughts. But the way to do it is what you just said. You have to put in your head positive thoughts, because if you don't, negative thoughts go in. There'll always be something. So controlling thoughts is a way of putting those.
Good question though. So
Yeah.
Jacob is in this pit and there's no water.
Snakes and-
So he has all these negative thoughts in his mind. He's not thinking positively of where it's going.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
No, Joseph?
Joseph.
No, Joseph was a metaphor. Joseph was in the pit. He was trying to fight for his life.
Right.
But it was a metaphor of the pit, which is this. The pit. Right? When there's water, there's no snakes and scorpions. When there's life-giving water, then life-ending snakes and scorpions are gone. When there's positivity within your brain, Torah, love, music, wisdom, inspiration, then you won't struggle with negativity. But if you let the vigil down,
So it's a metaphor of Joseph being.
Yeah.
That he-
And that goes
wasn't
also
a
to
pit,
the
yeah.
point you made
There was
about
a lot of
IFS.
negativity around him and everything else.
Exactly.
It wasn't so much in him, it was around in the earth.
exactly.
His brothers and everything.
Exactly. It was a metaphor for Torah. That's why the Torah is a metaphor for a template for the universe in general. And that's why that's how I wanted to answer your question. So in conclusion, this is how we were holding right now. We spoke about the four elements within us with the animal soul, that they're made up of these four elements. Be conscious and observe. Learn to observe. Identify fire, air, earth, and water within you. And all you need to do, according to Eckhart Tolle. Now, the Alter Rebbe, in my opinion, doesn't say this explicitly, but here's what Eckhart Tolle says, and I'm trying to find it in Tanya. He says the act of observing it neutralizes it. I think Parts Work IFS says the same thing. He's the power of now, by the way, the one I'm talking about. But I'm trying to think, does the Alter Rebbe say the same thing? I'm not sure. Must be. He must be somewhere in Tanya. It's embedded. But I believe, I'm pretty sure chapter 29. Yeah, it says it explicitly. He says in chapter 29, if you want to neutralize your klippa, which is this superficiality, the way to do it is by isolating it and verbalizing it. He says, actually talk to it. He says, I know that you don't define me. That's exactly what he says in chapter 29. So yes, I believe that IFS is a major expression of Tanya study. So let's just go one drop further, just to give you a taste of where this is going, because I'm going to finish over here. He says just one taste. He says, but also the positive temperaments with which the Talmud testifies. All Israel are naturally born, such as compassion, generosity, and bashfulness stem from the animal soul. Because remember, the animal soul is from Klippa. Klippa has both good and bad, the mixture from the tree of knowledge. Okay? All right, we'll leave it at that, guys. Lots of comments here. Emily Vigishti, how many lessons and teaching examples? Thank Hashem for his teaching, how to live our lives understanding in life and do our best. Thank you, Emily. Looks like you're new here. Send me an email. We'd love to hear from you, rabbigeorgegardens.com. Terry from Atlanta, we all have these elements within us. We each have a predominant ones. As we work on the predominant ones, the others rise to the surface. It's a constant cycle of inner work. Yes, Terry, I want to agree with you, because some people are more fiery. Some people are more earthy. Some people are more watery. And some people are more airy. It's just a temperament with which you're born. It's like a type A personality. It's an introvert. It's an extrovert. If you want to go to the Briggs-Meyer theory on, the various constructs of how human beings operate, it's quite fascinating when you incorporate it in this context. Terry, that's correct. Observing neutralizes it because it all needs acknowledgement. Baruch Hashem. Okay, so let's become the observer, conscious of within. And by the way, how do you do this? On a Friday night, how do you do this? Friday night comes Shabbos, and you want to experience serenity, peace. Serenity is not, first you shut the phone down, but serenity is a product not only of the absence of labor. Serenity is not experienced by shutting off your email or locking the office door. Serenity is achieved when you light the Shabbos candles and you go like this, drawing inwards, when you have the courage to reflect inwards and to face yourself, to face who you are. If you can do that, that's when you'll find peace and serenity. Over and out, guys. Have a lovely day.
So
Thank you.
Shalom.
they're one of the great Seinfelds.